The Bandsaw Life is proudly sponsored by Powermatic, Carter Products, and Typebond, the pro's advantage. All right, everyone. This is one of Sears' oldest classics, and it's one of my first saws. And I will tell you that I have had to make some parts myself because some of the parts are no longer available. But let's get this saw opened up, and if I show you a couple of things that I've done to remake my saw, what we're going to do is we're going to show the original guides, and then I'm going to show you a Carter upgrade for resawing, and then I'm also going to show you a scrolling guide that you can add to this saw. So first thing, we'll get this saw opened up. Set this off to the side. Now, something that is a real nice add-on is Carter makes this little ratchet attachment here that makes it a lot easier to tighten and loosen this. The other thing that you can do, since it is a 3/8 inch ratchet, is sometimes it's easier to put the whole ratchet up there. But this is just a nice add-on. Helps you tighten and loosen that blade. And of course, something I should have mentioned before we got started, make sure you've got that saw unplugged. All right, so we're just going to take the tension off. Now, this saw, it has this little screw down in the bottom. I lost mine, so I found just a simple thumb screw about the same size. Tends to work. You're going to have that off in order to get your blade out. I've made a different insert for it because the metal one that it comes with, they are still available, but they're also about $30. So I found it cheaper to make my own. We'll get that blade out of the way. Now, this has a handle on the back that basically is spring-loaded so you can pull out and adjust it and then tighten or loosen it. My handle broke, so I just took a nut and a washer to lock that into place. I'm just going to use my wrench, and we'll remove the table just so that, number one, it's easy for you to see what I'm doing here. You don't have to do this every time, but I really do like to remove the table on a saw, especially when I want to get it set up for the first time. And so you can see it's just basically one nut or one handle that you'll have to remove. This saw has a lot of adjustments that even I found it hard to find some of the adjustment screws and things. But one thing that a lot of folks don't know is this saw has a thrust adjustment. Everybody looks for that thrust adjustment around the back, and everyone assumes that this little slot head right here is to hold the wheel on. Well, that little slot head, you'll see, moves that wheel front to back, and that's how you adjust the thrust adjustment on this saw. Now, I will also tell you that it takes very little increments to move that. You want to make sure that you don't just give it, I don't think you can rotate it more than one full time before it starts hitting one side or the other. So remember, very, very small increments is what adjusts your thrust. Now, we've already talked about our tension. You can add that ratchet rod to it, or you can use the knob that it comes with. What I've done to change mine is underneath it had a screw adjustment in and out. Well, I actually used a bolt with a nut on the back side to adjust my side guides front to back and then lock it in with that front nut it still originally has our adjustment for our thrust bearing here and our thrust bearing here. Now, these are the original cool blocks, and I found it interesting that in order to adjust these, you start looking, well, the Allen screw is on the back side. So we'll just loosen those up so that we can adjust those out. We'll do the same thing down here, except for on this one, they're up front. So we'll loosen those up. So we can slide those out. And interestingly enough, these are the original blocks and they're steel. So these aren't even cool blocks. These are steel blocks. So I backed everything away completely. I've got everything opened up. I've got my thrust bearings pushed back out of the way. Now we'll install the blade. Now, this saw takes an 80-inch blade. This saw was probably made for 25 years by Sears, and it was the only nationwide company that sold bandsaws, so that's why there are so many of these out. And again, 80-inch is pretty much a standard blade for this. Rotate that blade into place. You can see the blade wants to come forward, so I'm going to tilt that back just a little bit. Remember, we want to put the deepest part of the gullet right in the center of the wheel. A little bit too much. Like I said, this is such fine little increment adjustments is all you want to do. And now I've got it adjusted to where the deepest part of the gullet's in the center of the wheel. Now I can begin adjusting my side guides after I get the tension. All right, now that I've got all of my guides completely de-adjusted, I'm going to get the tension. I know the blade is riding in the proper spot, deepest part of the gullet, center of the wheel. I'm just going to snug this up. Now, I always tell people to check on the left-hand side and always try to get just above your guard so you have a consistent distance from the wheel. This saw doesn't have a whole lot of area, so I like to use kind of the top of the switch to put my finger at. That way I get a constant distance from that wheel. Get that snugged up. We've got a 1/2-inch blade on here. And we want just about a 1/4 inch of deflection without essentially turning our finger white or numb. Just light pressure, shouldn't get much more than about a 1/4 of an inch there. So now I've got that tension set. We've got the deepest part of the gullet in the center of the wheel where it should be. Next, I want to adjust my thrust bearings so they're as close as they can get without actually touching. You can see that's actually turning a little bit there. So we'll back that away just a little bit. Now if it touches just slightly, but consistently, we want it to rotate without it actually touching. You can see that now doesn't rotate, but that's all I have to do to make it actually touch that bearing, is just very, very light pressure. So we'll tighten that up. Now, the Allen screw for this is right here in the side. So you're going to have to use a small Allen wrench in order to snug up that thrust bearing. All right, Now we've got our top thrust bearing adjusted. Now in order to adjust the lower, we simply loosen this Allen screw and just bring that forward. Now, the trick to setting up your thrust bearings is making sure that they are identically in line. And what do I mean by that? If one is touching and the other isn't, well, then the blade's going to want to dive one way or the other. So always make sure that when you set these up, they are set up so that you get a perfect alignment, so that when you touch right here in the center, they both turn, and when it's rolling, neither of them turn without any pressure to it whatsoever. Now, next, I want to make sure that I've got my alignment front to back. I don't want those side guides into the teeth of the blade. I want to make sure that our thrust bearing or our side guides are adjusted so that they're just behind the deepest part of the gullet. Remember, your tooth set begins at the gullet, so if you bring those side guides into the gullet, all you're going to do is flatten those teeth out, forming a knife edge, and then the blade will seek the easiest route through the wood. So, I've got them adjusted back on that one, and now let's bring this one forward so that it's just behind the deepest part of the gullet there. And then the way that you lock this to the post is this Allen screw right here. Again, there are so many little Allen screws that a lot of folks just don't know where you would adjust or tighten. And you can see that locks that front to back. On your side guides here, the one up top is on the inside here. So now we've got that locked into place. Now the last thing we have to do is adjust those side guides so that they're as close to the blade as we can get without them actually touching or turning constantly. So we'll lock that in. And the last thing is adjusting those side guides. So we'll get that. What I like to do when I'm using, and I don't use cool blocks too often, but I like to bring it up to the blade and then just give it a little touch on the side. That way I can get the daylight that I'm looking for between there, and it's not that difficult to push it back using the whole blade. So we've got one side set. Snug up this other side. This top one can be a bit challenging. Make sure we've got a little bit of movement there. Then we'll adjust these side guides. Again, I just bring it in, give it a little tap, snug that, bring that one in. Got a little movement there. Just like that, we've got everything adjusted. I'm going to put the table back on and show you just how accurate this can be. Now I'm not going to completely tighten that yet because I want to show you how to level this table so that we get a nice square cut. I will go ahead and throw our nut back in there. Put our insert in there. Here we go. All right, now that I've got my guide set, I want to make sure that my table is level or square to the blade. And the way that we can do that, the easy way to do that, is with a 2x4, or I'm going to use a 2x3. Since we're going to do some cutting, I'm going to put my safety glasses on here. Now, if you take a 2x, it's been joined on both sides, so it's relatively square. You want to put it on the table, and you want that 2x to be about the length of whatever your table is wide. And we'll just make a simple cut, flip the wood over, bring it around back. If that blade will go back into that cut, I know I'm level across the whole surface of the table, not just up one side or the other. Very easy way to make sure your table is good and square. Now, next, I want to set up my fence, and if you have a steel table, well, the easiest fence to add would be a Carter mag fence. But if you have an aluminum table, which aluminum table generally has the little grooves down it, you're going to have to put a straight edge and just clamp it front and back. But the main thing you want to make sure that you do is that you put the fence square to the body of the blade. That's easier said than done if you're just trying to do it by eye. I find the best way to do it is with a fast. Now, a fast is a fence alignment system tool. You'll notice it has a groove for the offset of the teeth. That's so that you don't go to the offset or angle the fence to the offset of the tooth. It has a magnet to stick right to the body of the blade. You can put this inside. These are stackable. They come in a set of 5, 1/8 through 1/2 inch. But the way I generally do it is I like to keep the 1/8 and 3/16 on the bandsaw, and I'll just put those teeth right in that groove. And let's say I wanted to set that fence for 2 inches. Well, then I'd use my second one, and I'd go 2 inches on the back, 2 inches on the front. I know I'm square, and I'm 2 inches away. And again, they're stackable, so you can use them on the inside if you prefer to do it that way. As long as you're within basically 1 inch, they'll work just fine. But right now, I'm just going to put that on the outside. I'm going to set that fence square to the blade. And we're going to see how this setup works. Now, I'm going to use a little bit of cherry. I've got about 4.5 inches here. And we're going to see how this setup works. Now, a little tip, when you get to the end of your board here, instead of keeping your thumb on the end where it could possibly cut you, reach around the back, only use the pressure on the outside, and finish pulling that through. It's a lot safer way of finishing up a resaw. But as you can see, we got a dead accurate straight cut, perfect top to bottom. Can't get much better a resaw than that. Now, we've gone over the original resaw guides. I hope you all enjoyed this. Thanks for watching.